We are live. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever it is for you. I think it's good afternoon in the UK, right? As soon as it hits 12.
Yeah, you've crossed that verge,
Yeah,
that precipice. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's kind of noon, isn't it? So good noon. Welcome everybody. If you are here, fantastic. Please say hello. If you are not here, then where are you? We'll give you a bit of a chance to join. If you are listening already, please just get in the comments already. Begin saying hello. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and where you're located. Just the more engagement, the better. And if you have any questions throughout this for Rich, probably put Rich Casement. Maybe if you want to ask him a direct message, because there is two of us, we can get involved and ask those questions. Because I always believe you guys are listening. You guys are living this a bit more than I am. So you could probably ask some better questions because these might be more relevant for you as well. So please do get involved. Where are we? We're a minute in. Just give people a little chance to join. As I said, if you are just joining, please say hello. Tell us who you are, what you do, or maybe where you're from, maybe more than what you do. And at the 90-second mark, we'll get started.
Don't be shy. Introduce yourselves.
Please do introduce yourself. Which is weird, right? Like this is a podcast at the same time as it's a live. So I always feel a bit, people listening, probably it's not the greatest start, but it's more about the live and actually getting involved. So yeah, get involved. Say hello. Anyway, let's get started. Rich, it's good to have you here. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on and talk about some of the lessons you've kind of experienced and gained through your life in regards to lifestyle changes, positive changes, work changes, how coaching's been helpful, and some of those other bits which could be really insightful for other people within corporate space whether they want to make a change through kind of their career or whether they're looking to make a change in their lifestyles. I think this episode could be really interesting for that. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Rather than me butchering your introduction, I'm going to allow you to do that. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to throw the mic over to you. So, hey, Rich, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah, so my name's Rich as well, as you can see. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a son. I'm a pretty normal, regular guy. Like I honestly am. People talk about influence a lot at the moment, and influencers, and I think wherever you look, there's people out there trying to influence us, and I tend not to see myself as an influencer. I try and inspire people instead, and be inspired by others, to do things that perhaps maybe feel unachievable at first, because that's kind of really me for the last sort of 4 years in particular. But yeah, I spent the first 20 years of my career working within sort of hospitality and the drinks industry. So I went to university, and like a lot of people do, kind of came away and worked in a bar because couldn't get a proper job. And then that became my proper job, but it was also like a hobby as well. So yeah, so that was good fun. Got lots out of that. Probably my first taste of being in service of other people, and a real love of creating experiences for people, kind of serving people and seeing the joy and experience of people having a good time in your presence, created by whatever it was you were doing. And then that led to me going into slightly less demanding in terms of sort of hours jobs, sort of typical situation in my late 20s, and started to kind of question perhaps some of the sacrifices that I'd been making, weekends and birthdays and holidays and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, went into sales roles within the alcohol industry. So still very much within that industry, working with bars and restaurants, primarily what we class as the on-trade or the hospitality industry, but selling product into them. And yeah, working with some really well-established brands from pretty much a very basic level, working solely with one brand in particular as what we've classed as an ambassador, right through to sort of senior national account manager roles, looking after some of the biggest pub and bar group chains in the UK. And yeah, and that was really me for the first sort of 20 years of my career, between the ages of really sort of leaving school, kind of 20 years old, and right up until 40, really 41 years old. And the vast majority of that was you know, a fantastic experience, which I'm truly grateful for. And I got to travel the world and meet some incredible people, and you know, see some amazing places. And you know, really, as I said before, it was the career was always more just kind of me doing my hobby. You know, something that I was particularly passionate about, and something that is very ubiquitous in certainly in Western culture. You know, our relationship with alcohol. And for the vast majority of that time, for me, it was something that I enjoyed, and I immersed myself in the knowledge, the learning, the understanding, the education, and then was, you know, finding myself in a position where I was educating other people around the products and the brands that I was selling, and also consuming as well.
Yeah, nice. And so that obviously that's just part of it, right? And there's a bit more to go from there, right?
There is quite a lot more to go from there. Yeah, that's really just the sort of the first part, really, the first half. I mean, if we look at sort of, I guess, productive life, if you like, people always often talk about, you know, kind of your 40s being the sort of midlife crisis sort of phase, if you like. Whereas actually, you know, productive lifespan really from sort of the age of 20 through till, you know, probably 70. If you'd imagine when people might be, average people would retire, unless you're very fortunate and able to do that beforehand. But that period of sort of 50 years, actually, you know, the half stage of that is sort of 45, 50. So I'm 45 this year. So I'm in the halfway point of my productive life. So when you kind of reflect and think about that, you know, that was sort of the first phase of my life, you know, which served me during that period. You know, the beliefs, the values, the behaviors, the environments, the habits, the experiences very much served me in that phase of my life. Whereas now I'm kind of moving into, I certainly have been the last few years, moving into what I see as a sort of a new phase of my life. And of course, a new phase, you know, it's not a crisis, it is a new phase, but a new phase requires people to adopt a new approach. And I think now, having stepped away from that long-term 20-year career, doing something different, pivoting at this point in your life, which comes with a degree of challenge and complexity, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, how I did that. But now I'm in a position where I'm sort of helping other people navigate those similar sort of changes in habits and beliefs and behaviors and values, and you know, sort of the language and, you know, the environments, you know, the careers, those sort of things that people go through. And now helping people navigate through their own changes at this stage in life as well. And yeah, for me, it was really when I got to my back end of my 30s, beginning of my 40s, where I started to kind of recognize that something wasn't quite right. There was something that was a little bit off. There was something that was quite fundamentally out of balance. I think COVID played a big role in that for me. Certainly from a reflection perspective, reflecting on what I was doing, how I was behaving, who I was, who I'd been, and who I was becoming. And started to question whether actually that role and that identity that I played, if you like, still served me or was still serving me, and I wanted it to serve me as I went into this new phase of my life. And and then pretty much straight out of COVID, I quickly realized that things were out of sync, and I needed to make some changes, some fundamental changes, you know, on a personal level, on a professional level, you know, in terms of my habits and my beliefs and my behaviors and my actions, because what I'd done and how I'd acted previously was no longer serving me.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people in that moment where they had a bit more time, they maybe were challenged, and through that change and through that kind of period, did begin to reflect a lot more and begin to question. So you saw a lot of change happening around maybe moving into something which is a little bit closer to their personal whys or values or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the period in COVID gave us, a lot of us, opportunity to firstly to be grateful for what we do have, you know. And I think when we strip back all of the things that you know, we kind of we've brought into our world, you know, into our lives, as we've become more efficient with technology and we've become ever more connected with the outside world, you know, actually stripping all of that away and leaving us with pretty much solely, for most of us, with just what was in our immediate circle, our immediate environment. And for some people that was really difficult and quite lonely as well. And you know, I would never overlook that for the people who probably spent, you know, months on end just by themselves in a flat. That must have been quite lonely. But actually, what it does tend to do, I think it for a lot of us did, is it makes us reflect on what we do have when we haven't got all of the things that we're sort of taken for granted in our lives, and actually reflecting on the fact that for many of us, we have a roof over our head. Of course, for some of us, they didn't have a roof over our head, and that was very difficult. But for many of us, we're in a fortunate position to have a roof over our head, to have food on the table, and to have hopefully the most important people in our lives around us. And in my case, that was obviously my family, my immediate family, my kids, and my partner, my wife. And a garden, and the ability to get out and sit in the glorious sunshine as it was when COVID first started, and reflecting on having that time to sort of recognize actually we're going to be okay, despite this lack of control of what was going on around us outside of our immediate universe. That I think for a lot of people that was very difficult. Certainly was for me, that sort of loss of control of external environment, all of a sudden not being able to sort of control the things which previously we perhaps felt we could have had control over. A recognition of, right, this is really all I've got, so I've kind of got to manage this process and got to deal with this.
Yeah, completely agree. I want to get into some of the learnings, right, and some of maybe the lessons you faced in your kind of career. Let's look at the corporate side or the business side of things before we look at the coaching and what's happened in the last 4 years. When we look at performance in that corporate space, was there anything there when you look back and go, these things really helped me kind of perform, or this is what I did to really show up well on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I think when I look back over that career, that it's punctuated with moments of decision making opportunities, or opportunities when I had choices to make, like a fork in the road, a path to choose. And I think for me, when I reflect on that period from a career perspective anyway, a lot of those decisions and choices were made based on, kind of quite sound reasoning, if you like. It was always quite driven quite practically, i.e., right, what is the best thing for me where I currently am in my life and in my career? What's the best thing for me to make a step forward, and ultimately progress within the what's commonly seen as, the sort of the natural progression of life and career. We kind of look at this world and think, are we constantly asking ourselves, are we making steps forward within our career? Do we feel we have, inverted commas, success? Are we succeeding in what we're going out to achieve? And I think through my 20s and my 30s, a lot of those decision-making processes at times were driven by, expectations of society, or what we traditionally would see as a form of success, and making progress. So I think those moments stand out for me. Certainly those punctuated career moments. What did I do? How did I go about choosing those next steps? What was right for me in each individual situation, weighing up the pros and cons, in a fairly objective way, I think. And again, the more and more I reflect on this, the more and more I think about how that was different and appropriate for me in my 20s and 30s. Whereas now I tend to be less, or I purposefully try and be less objective in my decision making, without solely thinking about the sort of rationalization, and actually think more about the human, the emotional side, and bring more of that into it. What's the true meaning and purpose and the why? Because I think a lot of those decisions, although I made with very rational reasoning, I don't think at the time I really asked myself a deep, meaningful, purposeful why would I be making that. And not that I look back and question them, or I doubt them, or I regret making those decisions, but in hindsight, with a little bit of experience now, I think perhaps I may have benefited on some occasions and some of those decisions of bringing in a slightly more emotional side to the decision making.
It's really interesting, isn't it? That understanding that is a big part of motivation, right? And that motivation would help you probably work harder and maybe smarter as well. If you were to take yourself back, how would you bring that emotion? What would you do? How would you make that change?
Yeah, well, you talked there about motivation in particular, or motives, if you like, around making those decisions. I think motivation I can see now a bit like willpower. It's really, really unreliable. It comes and goes. It's almost like energy tanks at the start of the day, and motivation and willpower are your energy tanks, or your willpower motivation tanks are full, and then by the end of the day they're generally quite empty. So it's that prime example of eating your frog, doing the thing that you least want to do in the morning when you've got those willpower and energy tanks most likely to be full, and do them then. But I think recognizing actually it's less about motivation and it's more about inspiration. I think looking back to those decisions, I think I would have tried to be more inspired by things as opposed to be searching for motivation, which often came externally. It's the external drivers which I was looking for motivating myself to do, to make a choice X or Y. Whereas now, decision making based on a more, I guess, a more emotional side of things, or more empathetic side of things, it's more around inspiration, and that inspiration tends to be intrinsic. Whereas the motivation, what was motivating me was often by external factors, financial gain, success in terms of kind of where you are in the ladder, etc. Can I afford to go out and buy a new car? Can we go on a fancier holiday? So all of these things are, extrinsically motivated, if you like, and a lot of that stems from, I think, from this belief that happiness is an external game. Sorry, that sense of being fulfilled comes from the things that are outside of us. Once I get there, it's that destination goal. Once I get there, I will feel fulfilled, or I feel like I've achieved X, Y, and Z. But actually, like, the reflection now really is more around, intrinsically, what are the things that are inside me that inspire me as opposed to motivate me, and knowing that sort of sense of fulfillment and joy and happiness really is inside.
Yeah, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I hear exactly what you're saying, and I completely agree. But I find that inspiration then creates the motivation.
Yes,
because I use that self-determination theory and the concept of mastery and relatedness and purpose, which all connects to motivation. I guess when I asked her, I didn't even think about it being an external. Obviously, the external side of things, I think when you're younger, you are striving for that. But once you've got that and you feel safe, then I think that probably begins to change. And then that's where people struggle. Maybe that midlife crisis begins to happen because they are safe, but they've missed the emotional side of things, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we don't, especially guys, I think a lot of, perhaps it's changing a little bit now, but certainly men in the sort of the age bracket that we're in. So I don't even know how old you are, Rich, and I'm not going to make a judgment about that, but certainly guys in the sort of 40 and above bracket.
Oh yeah, you've got 4 years on me. How dare you?
So I think we certainly come from a period where we're probably sort of trapped between a slightly more emotionally aware generation of younger men versus perhaps an emotionally detached generation, which is our father's generation, and we're sort of in that middle, that transition period. But yeah, I think that there is definitely there's definitely now, I see certainly myself and people that I coach, especially men that I coach around this age group, 40s and 50s, sort of almost like there is there's something trapped within them, a desire to become more emotionally aware, I think, emotionally intelligent, if you like, but also express themselves more emotionally, actually allow that to come out without it feeling like something that should, in inverted commas, be suppressed.
Yeah, I think I see that a lot within the coaching I do, and I think it's not just, especially from that kind of 30 upwards, I can see people beginning to question that. But maybe it's because of what you said, right? We chase external things first until we get that safety, and then we go, oh, now does this actually mean? I'm like, where does this mean to me? Like, am I just doing this? I don't really enjoy it, but it got me to this point, and that's why I was doing it. But now I want to be motivated, enjoy my job, all of those different things. I'm going to take a slightly different route quickly, because I really want to get into the concept of the lifestyle stuff, right? Obviously, you've blurred your background, but I know that background is full of medals and full of running successes, let's call it, and other event successes. I know it's not just running. Did you have that in your life throughout that period, or is that actually since that moment of change through coaching that you've started to do more of this stuff?
I've been running for about 18 years. So running has been part of my life for, quite a long time, really. I remember first, and I was always sporty at school. So I was always driven by, certainly by team sports, I think more so than anything else. When I was at school, there was certain that sort of camaraderie aspect. We talked about, playing hockey and, similar desires and sort of things that we enjoy and get out of team sport. So hockey, cricket, certainly were a big part of my school upbringing. And then as I went sort of to uni as well, continued playing, team sports for a while. When I got into my 20s, I think I lost a lot of that, for a number of different reasons. Partly it was lifestyle attached to career. Working in the hospitality industry requires you to firstly do quite long hours. You're on your feet quite a lot, late nights, and often a lot of weekend work as well. So that would inevitably impact my ability to play team sports. And I didn't really embrace individual challenge at that stage. My drivers were more around sort of short-term, fairly sort of quick wins and dopamine hits and pleasurable experiences. A lot around going out and partying, essentially, living a fairly hedonistic lifestyle with my friends, and dragging out the late nights of work into early mornings. And that would then mean that there was absolutely no chance I was getting up to play football or cricket or hockey on a Saturday or Sunday morning. So that suffered in that period a little bit. And it was only really when towards the end of my 20s when I stepped away from that and went to a more traditional, if you like, Monday to Friday type role, where I then was able to actually see, well, actually there's something there that I'm interested in doing now. I've got a bit more of this time and space and energy back that I can put into something else. So it was 2007 I think, when I first came across Parkrun, which was only a couple of years old at the time, and I went along and was really kind of almost smitten from day one, really. And then that led to this sort of, so I can run 5K, and that feels like a challenge in the moment, but actually feels really good when you finished and there's lots of other people, and maybe if I go back next week I can run a little bit quicker. And this sort of idea of self-development and self-improvement started to come from running, my experience of running, and that desire to maybe see if I could push a little bit further, see if I could push a little bit faster every time I rocked up. And of course the 5Ks led to 10Ks, the 10Ks led to half marathons, and then the half marathons led to marathons, inevitably a few years later, and since then even further beyond on occasions as well. So that has been, the last 18 years has been a huge part of my life. And I think different to when I was at school, where it was all team-led sports now, and running is still an opportunity to connect with people. It's a big part of my running is being part of communities and groups. For me, there's a very very strong draw on a sort of a solo basis. So it's almost kind of like it's almost become more than just the running and the performance goals. It's the enjoyment of the journey, it's enjoyment of the experience, it's tapping into sort of the inner experience that I'm having in the moment, in a very mindful way, if you like. So it's become At times, I think certainly through COVID, I used it not negatively, but I used it in the perhaps in the wrong way.
As a
Like any.
release.
Yeah, as a release, as a way of dealing with challenges. So kind of, almost a sort of a replacement for therapy in some ways, I think. I can certainly look back and see that that was the case. And I think previous to that, I think I could see that there was times where I would use running. It was my form of dealing with things, with dealing with challenges would be to go out and go for a run, to sort of the letting off of steam, especially as I went through my 30s and, we started to have kids and life started to change quite fundamentally. And, the pressure that comes with that, but then also my relationship with alcohol through my 30s started to change noticeably, and I progressively was drinking less alcohol through my 30s, despite still working in the alcohol industry, because of the detrimental effects that it was, physical and mental effects it was having on me, or I was feeling that it was having on me when I did drink. So I was sort of using the running as that let off. It was, letting off steam. And there is an addictiveness to it. It's like anything in life that makes us feel good, whatever it is, whether it's, anything that we get a sense of, the dopamine spike, or the serotonin, oxytocin, all of these lovely, things that get released in our body when we do exercise, but also when we do other things in life that have that effect, whether it's gambling, whether it's doom scrolling, whether it's pornography or whatever it might be, there's an addictiveness to it because of the way it makes us feel, and because of that search for that feeling that we then go back to. So I would then be searching for the feeling that the running was giving me, because that made me feel better about myself. But actually I wasn't really going more than surface level with that. It was only really the surface level that was being cared for in that sense. There wasn't I wasn't going any deeper than, peeling back more layers of the onion, if you like. And so I became quite acutely aware of that coming out of COVID, especially because I was furloughed. So, I had pretty much daily exercise, an hour to get out and go for a run. And then, of course, when COVID ended, we went back to work. That safety net was taken away. I couldn't run every day. So all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, right. I sense that there's something up here. There's something out of balance, out of sync here, because I wasn't able to use that coping mechanism that I'd relied on through that period to get out and de-stress, my sort of therapy, if you like. And that's when I first sensed that something was fundamentally out of balance.
So then what happened then?
What happened then? Well, it took typical bloke, typical guy. It took lots of different, and I don't want to say a rock bottom moment. It wasn't a specific moment, but I think that there's a period between probably just before COVID ending, just before COVID starting, and probably 2 years later. So from beginning of 2020 through till the end of 2021, a 2-year period, a lot of which was taken up by COVID, where there was it was punctuated with lots of different moments where actually, I could sense that mentally there was stuff going on. I was trying to process, but not processing very well, stuff that was going on mentally. So, I think going back in my life, probably elements of people pleasing, low self-worth, certainly sort of doubts over my own ability, constantly questioning myself, perhaps a fear of, not necessarily a fear of failure, but perhaps a fear of success in some ways, not perhaps an underlying sense of not feeling like I deserved success or happiness for whatever reason. And then coming up COVID, not having that safety net to go back to, all of a sudden I was having to deal with processing the feelings and the emotions without having the ability to go out and run every day. And at that moment, I've realized something was fundamentally out of sync. And as I say, typical bloke, I didn't act on that in the moment. It took a period of, being sat at, kitchen table, processing some challenging thoughts, thoughts around how I would, or my family and those closest to me would be better off if I wasn't on the planet, quite frankly. And I think, not necessarily so severe that I was going to ever act upon those feelings. And I think this is a totally different question in itself when we talk about a topic like suicidal ideation, because I think a lot of guys don't talk about it because it's not severe enough for them to actually go and act upon it. And I think that's part of the reason why guys don't talk about it, because it doesn't seem so acute that they're going to actually go and do something about it. So I'm not going to go and talk about these feelings. I'm just going to bury them. I'm just going to keep trying to, do whatever I've done, rely on the coping mechanisms I've had in the past. But clearly that was difficult to process. And there was a period of 6 months between the summer of 2021 until the end of 2021, where progressively my mental health deteriorated to the point whereby I accepted that I couldn't deal with what I was dealing with, just by myself, the kind of brushing it under the carpet, the typical guy, I'll go out for a run, or I'll go and meet my mates at the pub and have a few beers and whatever else extracurricular activities happen in those moments that will make me feel better. And that's, blokes being blokes and talking about these things. But actually I wasn't really dealing with any of the underlying issues. Again, it was just very much surface level stuff that was being dealt with. And all of that internally was building up and really the crescendo, if you like, was driving to run the Manchester Marathon in October 2021 from Leeds, feeling fit as a fiddle and in peak condition, recognizing I was going to likely go and run a pretty big marathon PB, and driving over to Manchester, listening to a podcast, Mel Robbins' podcast, and something that she'd said in that podcast brought me to tears in the car, and almost like a recognition that I was physically in peak condition, but mentally I was at my rock bottom. I was shot to pieces in many ways. Ran the marathon, finished, great PB, sat there with a can of alcohol-free beer at the end, looking at my medal, thinking, well, okay, the real work now needs to start, because this has all just been window dressing. This has all been a pretense. This has been an identity that I've been creating, that I've been pretending, hiding behind, that I'm all right. Actually, something fundamentally needs to change here. The first thing I did was not because it was the root cause of my problems, but because I knew it wasn't helping. The first thing I did was to just make a decision to take a clean break from drinking alcohol, initially for 6 months. And that was really the starting point of making change.
And so then you made that change, stopped alcohol. What else did you do at that point then to manage the emotional side, to get back to mentally fit?
Yeah, so the recognition that there was a need to have some professional help, if you like not being able to just do it myself, or not being able to just rely on speaking to my mates in the pub on a Friday night, Saturday afternoon. And I tried therapy actually previously, to go and kind of, myself and my wife had talked about it, and she was the sort of the catalyst to me doing that. Sort of telling me that you need to go and speak to someone about how you're feeling. So I tried therapy on occasions and never really felt like it had done anything more than scratch the surface. Found it useful in terms of talking about stuff, but didn't come away with it with any sense of there being any practical tools to take away for me to actually make positive progress forward. And I tend to be someone who looks towards the future, the present and the future, as opposed to reflecting on the past and feeling regret or shame about the past, because it's been and gone, and there's nothing really that we can do about that. So I kind of had this sense of therapy perhaps wasn't working or hadn't worked for me, and I accept that it was one therapist, so there's probably lots of therapists out there that would have been better to speak to. But for me, I wanted something at the time, or I felt I needed something at the time, which was going to help me make positive progress, steps forward, help me find more direction in my life, because I felt directionless. I felt I'd reached a stage in my life where previously I talked about those decisions and those forks in the road. I couldn't see a path. It was almost like a dead end. I'd kind of reached this stage in my life, and it's like, well, everything that I've done so far has led me down this path so far that I'm almost at the end of the world. It's almost like the what's the Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show, where he kind of gets to the edge of the world and is sort of knocking on, the screen, which is the sky. Yeah, and it was kind of like that, and it was like, right, this feels like the end of where I've got to, and I'm not quite sure how the hell to get out of this. And I feel like I'm in this kind of like container, and I can't see beyond the edge of this container. So wanting to see direction, wanting to see, help to see a future, was part of it. But then also wanting to, work with, for me, I need to work with someone who I could relate to, and I felt they could relate to me, because I didn't feel that the therapist had that. I didn't feel like the therapist could relate to my experiences on a personal, professional level. So I felt that there was a bit of a detachment there in the relationship. There wasn't a huge amount of rapport built, if you like. And I've always been someone who believes in, firstly, in career, do what you do most, but also align yourself with people around you who are your tribe, or you can sort of understand you and relate to you, and help lift you up. So funny enough, at that time, the end of 2021, I'd been put in touch with someone who I'd worked with in hospitality in the past, who'd gone through very similar experiences to me, in their life in recent years. And they had stepped away from that career like I had, and they'd gone down the process of retraining as a coach. They'd always had a passion for sort of helping people and understanding, sort of human psychology and the language that we use and belief systems and that kind of thing. And they'd stepped into this, they'd taken the plunge to step into this kind of coaching environment. And so this was the first time coaching kind of appeared in my life. And so I reached out to them, jumped on a couple of calls with them, and quite quickly recognized that actually, firstly, this person was someone I could relate to and they could relate to me, but also what they were talking about, the way that they were talking, the questions they were asking me, it was inspiring me. It was helping me to feel different about myself. It was helping me to search a little bit deeper. It was asking different questions of me, questions that were, more uncomfortable, but actually more pertinent. And more probing and more appropriate to, what I needed or what I wanted and where I was looking to go in my life. So they helped me start to see a pathway, and they helped me to start to remove the blockers that I think I'd previously had in my life, which had meant I'd reached this end.
Yeah. And it's very like coaching. What I like about coaching is it's kind of, as you said, forward thinking, challenging about kind of, okay, so how have you done that? Why have you done that? And how's that going to help you forward? What changes do you have to make a difference for yourself? I think that's where coaching is really powerful as well, especially for men. I think, and this is an assumption, right? But I do think men prefer that style of thinking. We want to be.
Yeah, I think what often comes up, and certainly something that's come up for me recently, as more of a reminder than something that was new, and it was from a podcast that we recorded, myself and my business partner, last week, which will come out in a month or so's time. But we're talking to this person, and they're a newly qualified coach, and they were talking about this sense of feeling stuck, and I think that is where coaching is most powerful, I think, is when people feel stuck. Like if you take a scale of, kind of -10 at one end, 0 in the middle, and +10 at the other end, with -10 being, kind of clinically depressed, and really in need for, psychological intervention, whether that is, counseling or therapy, and then plus 10 at the other end being you're absolutely flourishing in life, you're living your best life, you're absolutely smashing it, everything's going particularly well in the world. I think the vast majority of people are probably somewhere between sort of, you know, -3, -4, and perhaps, you know, sort of +4, +5, kind of in this middle ground. But there's almost this assumption that that's as good as it's ever going to get, or as bad as it's ever going to get. And you kind of find yourself sort of stuck in this middle part where actually we kind of, because this is kind of this cycle, if you like, the hamster wheel that we go through in life, and various different lifestyle choices, which I think attribute a lot to this being stuck in this cycle, people just accept this as life. You know, that's as good as it's going to get. Whereas actually, you know, coaching is really powerful for helping people go from that middle ground of sort of, you know, around the zero, you know, not the people that are in the -10, you know, that's a different realm to be in, and that's a different skill set that's required to help and support those people. But certainly people who are in and around, you know, a -1, -2 to sort of a +2, 3, 4, how can you help them come out of feeling stuck in this middle ground and this hamster wheel, and actually move forward into flourishing, you know, into to really embracing everything, every part of their potential, their human potential, which they probably haven't tapped into for one reason or another.
Yeah. And I really like that example, and I'm probably going to steal it if I'm honest with you, Rich. That kind of 0 to either way, right? And I do think I can see that completely. But I also think I'm just going to add here is like, that's from a lifestyle, that's from a whole human being standpoint, emotionally, and yeah. But then I think you've got this work capacity or work element to coaching, which maybe somebody is that kind of 4, 5, 6, maybe, but they're missing some structures, missing some skills which are going to help them at work, and maybe that is making them lower down. But I think there's this extra element of workplace support as well. But I completely agree. The title obviously is making positive lifestyle change. So look, you was introduced to coaching, you did some coaching. Now you are a coach, a qualified coach, right? What do you see as important? Yeah, how do you work with your clients? Let's talk about that. How do you work with your clients in making positive lifestyle changes?
Yeah, well, people come to coaching with, you know, a variety of challenges, if you like, or not necessarily challenges, but goals. You know, perhaps, you know, the challenge is how can they achieve the goal? Again, this idea of, you know, making positive progress. So the goal might be in relation to, you know, weight loss or exercise or career, or, you know, a belief system that they're holding on to, or confidence, for example. So, you know, whatever the goal is, it's about helping people remove those barriers. What is it that's holding you back from being able to work towards achieving, not necessarily a guarantee of achieving the goal, but whatever it is that's stopping you from taking the action towards doing it, you know, towards ultimately trying, you know, to take the action to do whatever it is required of you to move forward. So that's really where we focus. We have 3 clear pillars, if you like, of coaching, and those are, yeah, primarily they come from what myself and my business partner Andy have both experienced and been through in recent years. So firstly, it's movement. So it's running. Running for both of us has been a huge part of our lives, as I've described, and it's the same for Andy. Andy's currently training to go off to do a 5-day multi-stage 250-kilometer ultra marathon through the Peruvian Amazon jungle.
There's some crazy people in the world,
There's
isn't
some crazy bastards out there, yeah, and he is one of those. And this won't be his first rodeo either. He's done one in the Arctic Circle. He's done one in the desert ultra, and he's done one in the Kenyan plains, if you like, on safari. So this will be his 4th that he's done of these activities. That's slightly different to what I do. I prefer the shorter, sharper bursts, if you like, get it over and done in a day, you know, and home to my own bed and a bath and a shower at the end of the night. But
I prefer just to play sport.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So movement, as we call it, is a big part of it. And yeah, it's based around running, but ultimately it's about helping people move their bodies consistently and sustainably, because you know, movement is, you know, such a big part of the whole overall health and well-being. You know, it's not just about physical well-being. You know, moving your body is so much deeper in a consistent and sustainable way. You know, raising your heart rate, you know, pushing yourself out of what you a lot of people class as a comfort zone, you know, into discomfort. That is where you start to make progress and you start to make gains. You know, you start to see the physiological benefit of doing that on a consistent basis. You know, and that's where not just the physical gains, but also the mental gains. But on a deeper level, for me as well, personally, running is a spiritual experience. You know, I use running in a mindful way. You know, I use running in a meditative way. I use running to connect with myself on a deeper level. You know, I talk about the three key elements of running are, yes, the body, yes, the mind, but also, yes, the soul. It's the purpose, it's the why, it's the spirit inside. So the first thing that we support with is the movement side of things. The second part that we support with is the lifestyle side of things, which is often one of the lifestyle elements can often be one of or some of the things that prevent people from consistently doing the movement elements. So specifically in relation, again, to alcohol and helping people to reframe their relationship with alcohol. Not necessarily has to be an all or nothing approach, but fundamentally, I think for a lot of people in that middle lane, again, you know, not languishing, you know, not flourishing, similar sort of scale, if you like, not in active addiction or physical dependence and not in abstinence, but somewhere in the middle, you know, kind of functioning, you know, drinking Thursday through till Sunday, you know, recovering Monday through to Wednesday, you know, being able to go through the motions at work quite, you know, positively and still hold down a successful career, you know, being a parent, but probably not quite showing up as consistently as you'd like to be with your kids at the, you know, weekend football matches or whatever it might be. And then socially, kind of almost like this reliance on it for confidence, for self-belief, for enjoyment, for fun. So helping people to reframe all of those beliefs. And having spent 20 years working in the alcohol industry, I know that everything that people attach to in terms of a reliance on alcohol is a belief. Now, it's a belief that we choose because our beliefs, we're not born with our beliefs. When we're born, we don't come into this world believing that you need alcohol to have confidence or to have fun or to socialize or to network with people. You know, it is a learned belief which comes from, you know, the ubiquitous nature of alcohol in our society. So we learn these beliefs that we need alcohol for X, Y, and Z. But at any point, we can choose to have a different belief. Now, I got to that point where I recognized actually it was probably just a belief system that alcohol was serving me in a way that it once did. And so I made that choice to choose a different belief. And now I know full well that actually the benefits of not drinking aren't just belief system driven, they are factual. Because you factually see the benefits, you know, you see the positive impact, you know, and then actually you can see it for what it is. And the key is, you know, not taking an all or nothing approach or a forever approach. It's actually making, firstly, awareness that maybe it's not serving you in any particular way. And then secondly, acceptance that because it's not serving you, it may be a time where you need to accept that it's not serving you and actually take a clean break in inverted commas. And a 90 to 100-day break really is the sweet spot for a lot of people, I think, where, you know, where you're not in that active addiction dependence, but you can start to realize the benefits fully, but also create a level of consciousness and awareness that, yeah, this is how good I can feel when I don't drink. Knowing how bad you feel when you do drink, right, it becomes a more conscious decision. Am I willing to pay that price, you know, for that experience? So that's the second part, the lifestyle part. Lifestyle choices, but also, you know, what often stems from taking a break from alcohol is that the other inconsistencies in lifestyle choices tend to become more apparent. So, you know, the poor nutritional habits, you know, at weekends in particular, or the habits that you have when you know, quick service food, when you know, go to work for whatever reason, not preparing yourself for your meals through the week. But then also other lifestyle habits like, you know, just not drinking enough of this stuff,
Mhm.
you know, is a fundamental one as well.
Mhm.
Sleep habits, you
Mhm.
know, people talk about morning routines, but, you know, stop worrying about your morning routine, start thinking about your evening routine. And when you focus on your evening routine, I guarantee that your morning routine will become a lot easier to nail down, because that morning routine starts with the evening routine. So those elements. And then the third principle is mindset.
Mhm.
So everything that's going up here,
Mhm.
what are the fundamental beliefs that are entrenched in us? Again, going back to what I said before, beliefs, at any point we have the option to choose what we believe about any given situation. So we will always have agency over the fact that we could choose a different belief.
Mhm.
And often the beliefs that we have aren't helpful. So how can we choose a more helpful belief about the situation we're in? So those are the kind of three
Mhm.
key pillars.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I really do like that, and I like the concept that, especially when it comes to the mind, it's the belief. It also shows you the controllable element of it as well.
Yeah, that dichotomy control is shapes it all, really, you know. And one of the biggest transformational things that I've come across in my life in recent years is, you know, that this awareness of what's within our control,
Mhm.
you know, because we get trapped into thinking that we can control things. You know, we're thinking we can control other people's opinions. We're thinking we're in full control of our own health, of our own wealth, thinking we're all in control of how the kids behave, you know, thinking we're in control of the traffic, for example. And just all of this stuff, to some degree, is out of our control.
Mhm.
You know, yes, we can influence things. You know, yes, we can, you know, play a role to a degree in changing or steering the outcome of certain situations, but most things in our life are to some degree out of our control.
Mhm.
So recognizing that actually the only real things, and two real things in our life that are truly within our control, fully within our control, number one, our beliefs, as I
Mhm.
said before, and then secondly, our behaviors, you know,
Mhm.
the actions that we take, the
Mhm.
words that we use. You
Mhm.
know, those are the only two things in our lives that we're really in control of 100%.
Yeah, and I love this. This is one of the bits I kind of introduced through coaching to my clients, and for a lot of people, it's an eye-opening thing. Understanding that we are thinking or worrying about a lot of things, but when we understand what is in our control, and as you said, use the word influence. And so whenever I talk about influence, I go, well, we can influence it, but within that influence, there's a controllable. Okay, well, if I want to influence Rich into doing something, there's an action I have to take. I have to speak to Rich, and so that I can control that action, I can control that influence. So how do I influence that? And when people begin to understand that and they put that onto a piece of paper or kind of begin to see those controllables, it makes a big difference in their output and in the way that they work, and even just the, as you said, the mental fitness side of things and the way that they process information as well.
Mm,
Become way more
yeah.
resilient, way more kind of high performing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, an ability to sort of detach yourself from the outcomes, you know, because it comes back to this concept of we focus on a lot, especially with our running coaching clients specifically, is destination goals versus process goals.
Mhm.
You know, the destination goal is, yes, it's the North Star and it sets the trajectory of where you're wanting to go towards, you know, but actually the process goals are the important bits, the bit in the middle, the daily actions that you take, repeatable actions and habits that you take that are going to help you make
Mhm.
steady progress towards that end goal. And that end goal might not be, again, accepting that that end goal might not be achieved. You might not be fully successful in achieving what that outcome is, but that's also okay. As
Mhm.
long as you focus on the process in the middle and you enjoy the journey, then the outcome and detaching yourself from expectations of achieving that outcome, you know, makes that part of it much more enjoyable, because the journey is in the moment, is in the present moment. You know,
Mhm.
the outcome is in the future. And
Mhm.
constantly fixating on something that may or may not happen in the future, which to some degree is outside of your control,
Mhm.
can be really detrimental to your physical, you know, spiritual, mental health.
Mhm.
You know, whatever it is. You know, if you're a runner and you're so fixated on hitting a sub 4-hour marathon and you do it to the point whereby you overtrain and you give yourself a stress fracture and an injury, that's detrimental to your physical health and your mental health, because you then won't be able to go out and run, because you've injured yourself. And likewise, if you're so fixated on on wealth and success and business and creating something that drives you into the ground, and your marriage suffers for it, and you don't see your kids at weekends, that's not good for you either. But have that North Star to set that trajectory, to show you where you're trying to get to, but focus on the moment, focus on the daily actionable, repeatable habits, and actions that you can take.
I think that's a huge part, right? I always say to people, and I think it hits a nerve with me, because you know what business is like, right? It's a challenge, it's hard, and we're both relatively young, although you've made me 4 years older. I always say, just enjoy the moment. Like, you've got to enjoy the now. Like, I'm working hard, like I'm running my own business, but I have to enjoy this journey, because if I don't, then what? I'm just working towards the goal the whole time.
What is the point? What is the point? If you're not enjoying the moment that you're in, what is the actual point? People look for this meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? But really, it's about it's here and now. It's we're thinking about, right, where are my feet right now? Because ultimately, everything you've got right here, right now, in this moment, when you realize that, you are enough. Because worrying about, or having shame or guilt attached to the past isn't in the moment, isn't in the present moment, and it doesn't exist. And then the future, future forecasting, and holding on to that goal and attachment in the future causes a sense of anxiety or stress around whether it may or may not happen. But again, that's taking you away from the present moment. Right here and now, in this moment, we have everything that we need in this very moment.
And that's where I like. And that's where, for me, the purpose and the meaning comes in, right? Because if you live in the moment, you can question yourself: am I doing everything right now for that future self? This is where the controllables come in, right? Yes, I'm enjoying now because I can enjoy that now. I can enjoy the work I'm doing, enjoy the people. I can have fun. My number one value is fun. But am I also now working and pushing myself to be better for that future goal that I want to have? That's my challenge the whole time. That's the reflection. And I think that's what us as coaches are good at doing as well, right? Because I think, I know, making another assumption, I think men want that challenge.
There's a balance, isn't there? I think, there is a balance between being in the moment, living in the moment, because if you solely just live in the moment, you might just end up constantly meditating for the rest of your life, not getting anything done productively. So there has to be an element of, that reminder of what is the North Star, what is the overarching goal, constantly, reminder of where it is you're trying to get to, or what is the overarching purpose, as you say, to make sure that you are on that trajectory, and I use that word trajectory instead of, specifically a direction, because I think it represents better life. A trajectory is kind of a general direction that you're going in, because there will be ebbs and flows. It's going to weave in and weave out, and there's going to be ups and downs, and sometimes you feel like you're going backwards, sometimes you feel like you're going forwards much quicker than you expected to be. Whereas like just one direction, it's almost like an assumption that it's just on one clear path, and it's constantly like a Roman road going straight forward in the right direction. Whereas trajectory is that, much broader description.
Yeah. Look, I'm just conscious of time. Somehow we filled 58 minutes, which is great. I want to just bring this to an end, and I think this is probably the best question for that. With all of what we've just spoken about, and someone listening right now, what's the one thing, or what's the one piece of advice that you would give them to make that change? What would that be?
It's a great question. I wish I should really have one kind of mantra, I think, that I pull out in these scenarios. But I think actually, like, it changes. It's almost like the question of what's your favorite food, or what's your favorite movie, or what's your favorite song. And I think it changes. There's so many, great nuggets of advice and things that I've learned and adapted and adopted over the years that sort of helped me. So to kind of pick out one necessarily would perhaps not be appropriate, but right here in this moment or in this season of my life that I'm living, I think it's consistency over intensity. I think is the biggest thing for me right now, and I think, you know, we underestimate the value of being consistent. You know, showing up, doing the slightly boring, kind of dirty, fundamental work. And we often opt, again, it comes back to this short-termism and this desire and this need to have everything immediately. It's like the intensity element, which again, I think society, you know, has led us to. Everything's at the click of a button, or, you know, you can order a pizza, or, you know, whatever it might be, you can have whatever you want, the immediacy of life. But actually, I think, you know, consistency, showing up consistently over time, that equals progress.
I love that. The world-class basics, consistency of the world-class consistency of the world-class basics, and consistently doing it. Where like it's such a personal training thing, right? We always talk about it. It's we don't care what you do, as long as you do something, and just make sure that thing that you're doing is something that you can do consistently.
Well, doing something is always better than nothing, you know. And again, I say this to our runners who often, you know, miss a session or maybe miss a week through commitments or through illness or injury or whatever. It's like, you know, doing something is always going to be better than doing nothing. And as you say, those foundational, you know, the foundations of you know, making progress. It's the little things, it's the daily repeatable habits and actions that you can do consistently, which compound over time to create momentum, but also, you know, help you make progress towards that overarching goal.
Yeah, completely agree. Rich, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You're on LinkedIn. The guys listening to us now can find you here, but for everybody else on YouTube, where can they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, obviously, but then primarily on sort of social media. We've got our Instagram page, which is clean.break.coaching, where we're putting out sort of daily content around our sort of key coaching pillars of movement and lifestyle and mindset. And then also we have a podcast as well, which is called Clean Break Chats, which is a weekly podcast that we've been doing now over a year. Where we bring in guests, but also have every other week we have a guest, but then we also have just myself and Andy. Both, as I said at the start of this podcast, you know, normal guys, everyday guys. You know, we're not influencing people. We are just here trying to inspire people and show people that, you know, you can achieve pretty much anything that you want to in life. So yeah, that's the main areas where you can find us.
Yeah, I love it. And hopefully I can be a guest on there soon as well.
You are on the list of guests. Come on, Rich. Yeah, we need to replicate. We need to reverse the host and the guest.
And see if I can stop myself asking questions instead of giving the answers instead. Look, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you. Everybody who's been listening, thank you for joining us. And I'll see you next week, where I'm speaking to Matt Phelan, talking about the science behind organizational happiness. So that's going to be a really great session, looking at kind of workplace happiness. So for everybody else, have a great afternoon, great week, and see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Rich, stay where you are.
Thanks, mate.